BlueScreen Brothers podcast on YouTube. Today we're talking about Defender for API, part of Microsoft's Defender for Cloud. Together with me, I have Olav and several guests. So just to get some background information on our guests here. First, we have Niclas Madsen, that has been a guest before. Niclas, care to say 10 words about yourself?
Yes. So I'm from Accenture and in our cloud and infrastructure and AppSec security department, actually. So happy to be here. And yeah, we have brought some friends from Microsoft. So Yura, will you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. My name is Yura Lee. I am a product manager here at Microsoft within the customer experience team, working specifically with Defender for Cloud.
Awesome.
Yeah, and with me, we've got I've got some of my teammates here. Liana, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Liana, and I'm also in Microsoft, also on the same team as Yura. Also working on Defender for Cloud with the speciality of APIs as well. So it's great to be here. And we also have Harris as well. So Harris, maybe if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, thanks everyone. My name is Horace. I'm one of the product managers working on Defender for APIs, also within Defender for Cloud as well. So super excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you all. So Yura, what is API security and why should customers care?
Absolutely. Let's get started. So today we do want to talk about API security, and the objective is to talk about Defender for API. But let's take a step back really quickly and first think about why API security is relevant today. To introduce APIs, again, just really quickly, application programming interface, right? APIs are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. In fact, studies indicate that 83% of internet traffic today is driven by APIs. So, for example, you might be looking for to book a travel online, right? Or maybe you're looking up weather on your search engine. Chances are you're using API. The APIs are powering those digital experiences. So they're at the heart of communication between services and users and cloud. And so as we are moving towards an API first approach, companies are creating cloud native applications. We're seeing API just grow massively at scale, exponentially, right? So we're seeing a lot of API proliferation. So naturally, with API proliferation comes a complicated way to handle API security. So this is why we care, and this is why customers should care. Customers might have existing tools like, as you see on the slide here, you might have, network firewall, an application gateway, web app firewall, API gateway. And we've also got, you might also have API management, right? While these tools are absolutely necessary and they provide traffic control, rule-based detections, you can do so much with these tools. But they really fundamentally lack API behavioral knowledge. So this is where we have a big hole in API security.
Exactly. So I have definitely customers that are currently using just application gateway for publishing APIs. A few reasons for that. Just some cost-sensitive customers, for example, but it's really not made for APIs, and you can really tell. It works sort of on a I want to publish all my APIs on the same URL or something like that. Sort of works, but it doesn't understand APIs, right? It just understands HTTP, which really doesn't help too much in a more advanced world.
Yeah. We do see customers that take your approach, your customer's approach. We see customers with specific cloud level resource protections, on top of, API gateways. But there is still, we're still, vulnerable because, like you said, we're not looking at, API specific protections, right? For example, we're seeing threats that are related to business logic abuse, like, leaving an API unauthenticated, right? We're seeing that threat actors, they know this, right? And this is very exciting for them. They're taking full advantage of this and using APIs as their primary attack vector. And we have lots of real life examples, right? So recently, within the past, even 3 years, we're seeing these big corporations, take the hit, take a lot of impact. We have sensitive data lost. This is our sensitive data that's being exposed. There's PR damage, legal fines, and revenue loss, and the millions of dollars, and that's not going away. It's not reducing anytime soon. So API security, we see that it absolutely needs to be a critical part of a security strategy for all organizations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what are you sort of, or what other things are customers doing currently for securing or essentially managing security in their APIs? It is just sort of done on a, which I believe, I don't know really the English word for it, but when you sort of just stumble upon your different, that's probably something we should check. And this approach, that's what I'm seeing all around.
Yeah, it's very reactive, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We're seeing very reactive movements. We're finding that customers, they don't necessarily even know that a certain API exists. We do have customers use APIM, and that kind of helps, manage APIs within their organization, and that's a really good step. But again, we are missing that API specific behavioral knowledge, and so this is why we're asking customers, we're asking a couple of our customers, a few fundamental questions to help better understand what API security is and help customers kind of realize that, hey, this is something that you should be paying attention to. So as you see on the slide here, we're asking questions like, are your existing APIs in your enterprise, are they configured correctly? How many of these APIs transfer sensitive data within your cloud environments? And to your point about being reactive, if an active exploit was occurring right now, how would you be able to detect it? And so these are the types of coverage that you should be looking for. We're urging customers to look for when you are looking to expand your API security coverage. That takes us to Defender for Cloud. I'm gonna skip this slide really quickly. We at Microsoft, right? And on your episodes, you've talked about Defender for Cloud. You know what it is. It's our vision to help customers secure cloud native applications throughout the application lifecycle, right? And on top of that, we're not just covering Azure, we're covering AWS, GCP, and of course, many customers have hybrid cloud environments, so we're covering those as well. For those that are joining us new here, really quickly, Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Defender for Cloud, MDC, is a cloud native application protection platform. It drives effective collaboration among developers, DevOps teams, security teams, SOC analysts, all to reduce excessive risk for cloud native applications and to embed security across the entire application cycle. That's our goal here. We are a CNAPP leader. So a CNAPP, again, is a cloud native application protection platform. And we provide capabilities to customers. They can have full visibility and coverage with agentless scanning. integrated insights and tools across DevOps, external attack surface management, cloud infrastructure entitlement management, cloud workload protection platform, cloud security posture management, and more, right? We have a cloud, a context-aware engine to prioritize your most critical risk. We follow the principle of least privilege across multi-cloud environments with cloud infrastructure and title management. And we also have built-in capabilities to protect cloud-native applications from development to runtime.
Exactly. So yeah, because things that I see at many customers is also that you have these centralized services such as APIM or just the application gateway, and the detections and everything. It sort of takes a long time to get to the actual developers that are responsible for the APIs. So more of a integrated DevSecOps there is absolutely something to strive for or strive towards.
Yeah.
No, I would just say
Sorry, go
I
ahead, yeah.
agree. So what we see a lot, at least, is developers. They're very keen on the operational part, right? They need to have the APIs to work, but they don't really care too much about exposing things. I mean, that's a little bit on the edge here, but if things are working, then we are good. And then they don't think too much about the consequences of the configuration that they made.
Yeah, just disable the web application firewall, then everything is fine because now it works.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you also have the create and forget. They create the API,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
everything works, and then stuff changes over time, but things changes in the API if they get the security alerts.
And another thing as well I would say to this is that sometimes developers don't know what the right way to do this, to actually secure the APIs are as well. So that's why sometimes it's up to the security teams to make sure to kind of do that that sort of training piece and inform the developers what's needed and what's missing. But for that, even the security people need to know, well, what are the problems? Like what is actually wrong with the APIs? How are they insecure? So that would be the first step. And once the security people know, then they can pass the information on to the developers.
Absolutely. That's why that's a great segue to Microsoft's approach to API security, right? Because we see all of these all these folks kind of working in silo. Defender for Cloud, we provide fantastic ways to open up that communication, to provide alerts and reminders, and say, hey, a certain resource like this API absolutely needs remediation. So let's bring everyone together and complete that task. For API security within Defender for Cloud, right? Our approach again is to help prevent, detect, and respond to API threats with the integrated cloud security context. So again, it's not just your API, because your API might be connected to something else, which might be connected to something else, and it affects this and that, like you said. So again, it's important to have that context. So first, with Microsoft's approach, we help classify and understand the API posture based on the cloud security context. So basically what that means is, security admins, developers, we don't always know what's going on except, what's in front of us. To know which APIs are unauthenticated, for example, or like you said, they created and forget it, it's dormant. To know that these exist in the environment is very critical and crucial, right? The second part is to harden the API configuration. So we provide best practice recommendations on how to harden both your API and your APIMs in a full lifecycle approach across development and runtime environments. And we provide tools to help customers proactively hunt for threats as well, if that's a priority there. We have that attack path that we will show you in a bit. I'm almost done with explaining this, but the final part is monitor and protect APIs against attacks in runtime. Right? We encourage a defense in depth approach. Detect against data exfiltration, volumetric attacks, and OWASP, API top 10 threats, and more. We have machine learning and threat intelligence based detections that will help with that. And Liana, I think this is a good segue to show a lot of this in action.
Yes, that's absolutely
Yes.
something we want.
Yes, sounds great. So I will just start sharing my screen now.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So I am now in Defender for Cloud, and what I've gone is I've gone into the environment settings, because the first thing that I want to show you is just how to enable or where you can actually find the enabling of Defender for APIs. So under environment settings, if you find the subscription that you want to enable this on, so I'm going to select our demo subscription here. And here you can see a list of all of the Defender plans that we have within Defender for Cloud that can be enabled. So you can see we've got the Cloud Security Posture Management plans that need to be enabled. And then we've also got the Cloud Workload Protection plans. So the one that I want to highlight here is the APIs. So this is the Defender for APIs plan. And here, this is where you need to make sure that this is enabled, that this is switched on. And you're also able to see the pricing information that we have here as well. So like, how much does Defender for APIs cost? So what I'll say is that currently we're able to protect APIs that are sitting behind an Azure API management service. So here you can get more, some more details about this, and you can see the plan details. So you get this unified inventory of all of the APIs, as we've already talked about, and so on. And here you can see how much you can see the different tiers or plans that we have that are around the billing. So basically, organizations are able to decide for themselves based on how many API calls they expect to have in this in the APIs that are in the Azure API Management Service in this subscription. So here we've got
this is a bit like commitment tiers for log analytics and things like that, right? Where you can essentially say that, well, I'm going to have this amount, so it will you can sort of book on
exactly
saying that, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So if you select like the first plan, you're saying you expect to have up to 1 million API calls per month in that in the subscription. So that will cost $200. And then as well, you can see this little information, but Bubble also talks about so like say that you thought you would have 1 million API calls that month, but then you had an extra 100 API calls, just as an example. What would happen then? Well, the protection doesn't stop, because that's very important. We still want to be able to protect all of the APIs. So the charge is actually on the screen there. You can see that it's basically an overage charge for the extra API calls that occur. So it's 0.0002 per each of the API calls after that. So that's, you can always rest assured that you will always be protected. And then if you expect that, it's actually going to be more, you can always go up. That's also totally fine as well. So yeah, so this is where you enable the plan and where you select it, and you select, and you can select this yourself. Microsoft will never force you to go up. So if you're you're on, at the moment, if you're on Microsoft Defender for APIs Plan 1 in 1 month, and you have gone over, say you've gone over even like 500,000 API calls, Microsoft won't force you to go up unless you want to, unless you make that choice. So it's really very, very helpful to actually plan out how much you'll have to, you'll be able to plan how much you'll have to spend.
Exactly. And if you have like DDoS protection, then that is, I guess, also sort of covering this if you have that and you have an attack, because that can increase your API call or the number quite a lot.
Yeah, well, I suppose if there's like if there's a DDoS attack, we've also got the alerts as well that Harris will talk about, where you can you'll actually be alerted that this is occurring, or there's a higher number of API calls that has occurred than what you'd expect. So you would actually be alerted for this as well. So you would be able to take action on that.
But I think it's, I mean, for the DDoS thing, you can probably enable your rate limiting or your throttling as a precaution for this instead. But I have a question for this. I might know the answers, but maybe some of our listeners, they do not. So if I enable this API plan here, it's just for my subscription here that contains the API management. Is that correct? So if I have 2 API management services in 2 different subscriptions, I cannot combine them with one plan.
So no, this is per subscription. So all of our Defender plans are all on a subscription basis. Now you can also, of course, enable the plans on as many subscriptions as you want. You can also enable it on the whole tenant. But in terms of the billing, it is per subscription.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So basically you get to, that's where you can turn it on. So now that you've turned on the plan, what do you actually get? So Yura has gone into some of this already, but I will go and basically show you. So here under Defender for Cloud, I'm now going to go to Workload Protections, and I'm going to show you the API security blade that we have here. And this is basically our unified dashboard, our API security unified dashboard. And here you're able to see, this is for the security person to see which APIs are there. So what are the list of APIs? And in this, our terminology is API collections. They're like collections of API endpoints, you can think of it. And you can see the names of the APIs there, and you can get more information about them. Like you can get the base URL. You can also see where it was discovered. So these are different APIM services, Azure API Management Services. You can see the number of API endpoints that are in each of them, and then you can see where they have they been used in the last 30 days or not. Is there authentication there, and is there, just I'm zoomed in a little bit so it's easy to show, is there external traffic that is observed, and are there any sensitive data endpoints as well? And you can also see as well if there's any data labels. So I'm actually going to click into this API collection here and show you how it would look at the API endpoint level. So this is now, in this case, it's Echo API, and it comes with these endpoints, the endpoints names, and these operations. So this is where you can see how a security person would be able to take a look at this API, Echo API, and also because we were able to see that there were sensitive information types as well. You can see this Ninja FTE. This is a label that comes from Microsoft Purview as well. And if I just show you as an example, this one here, so this remove resource API endpoint, it's a delete operation. It was last called, I suppose this was last month, so it has not been active in the last 30 days. It is unauthenticated, which means that, you know, there's no authentication for somebody to go and call this and delete these, delete the data within there. There has been external traffic that is observed. So again, on the 3rd of November there. And then there's also it also accesses sensitive information types as well. So you can basically see it accesses the credit card number and also one more. And it has also been labeled as a Ninja FTE. And where these are coming from is these are actually these labels and the sensitive information types are coming from Microsoft Purview as well. So in this case, you would have in this case we have Microsoft Purview that has been configured to say that these endpoints are labeled with Ninja FTE, and there's also these sensitive information types that have been discovered. So if we click on it, you can basically get more information here. But at a high level, you're able to tell, okay, so these, actually, sorry, I'll go back here. So basically this endpoint, it hasn't been used for a while. Anyone can access it from the internet, and it accesses sensitive data. So like straight away, a security person would be able to say, oh, okay, this is a potential issue here. This is something that somebody could, you know, just from the internet access this and delete sensitive data. So straight away, this is something that we would recommend to actually go and fix this, improve the situation somehow. And when we actually click on it, this is where Resource Health really shines, because you're able to see a list of the recommendations that are associated to improve the security posture of this API endpoint. And you can get more information there as well. And you can see the list of the sensitive info types. In this case, it's credit card number and US social security numbers. So
and that is discovered through the like open API definition and things like that? Or?
So these sensitive info types are discovered through Microsoft Purview. So in this case, and the sensitivity labels. So in this case, if a customer using this product, or you know, if an organization is using this product and also Microsoft Purview, then if there are API endpoints that have these sensitive information, then they would be shown here. If they don't have Microsoft Purview, they would still get the sensitive information types that are available by default as well from the Microsoft classification engine. So those are the default kind of sensitive info types. But if an organization wants to have their own, like they want to specify their own sensitivity labels as well, or their own sensitivity information types, they're able to do that with Purview, and that will be shown here as well. So it's customizable for the organization. Like what is sensitive data for the organization? And
so,
if that
so
sensitive
my
data,
developers actually don't really need to sort of be too knowledgeable about those info types then?
No, yeah, exactly. It's not something that it wouldn't in general be the developers who are looking at like creating these sensitivity labels or these sensitive information types, and then they would just, you know, this would be the security person would be able to see from here, based on whoever has created, you know, whoever in the organization has actually created, has used Purview and created those sensitive labels and information types. They'd be able to see these APIs have these sensitivity labels and these sensitive information types. They're important. We should look at these. We should secure these.
And just to add to that as well, just to kind of clarify, the way that this works in the background is we will monitor all of that API traffic that comes in. So the way that we actually derive the sensitivity is we will actually look at the raw API request or response body. So we won't look at the open API definition in this case. We'll look at the actual request response bodies and compare that to the sensitivity like labels that we have.
Exactly. That's cool.
It's super cool. Another thing here, just to add to it,
Yeah.
I mean, I believe you can combine this with your Defender CSPM, so you can use governance rules when you have,
Yes.
you know, these high and low, for example, or medium severity
Yes.
alerts or recommendations to
Yes,
actually be
exactly.
notified.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'll actually do now is I'll go into the recommendations here, and I just opened it just to make it kind of quicker. But in Defender for Cloud, in recommendations, so you can see a list of them here, but you can also see those that are applicable to the APIs that we saw there. But here from the recommendations pane, we're able to actually show you a list of all of the recommendations associated with these APIs, and I've just filtered for it to save time. So from here, you're able to see also who you're able to determine like the status of these. You can also set owners on these as well, like you said, with the governance capability that is coming from Defender CSPM. So yeah, this is very, very powerful. And now what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to go, so yeah, I'm in recommendations now under secure score recommendations, and I'm just going to select the resource types of the APIs. I'm going to select API management services, API collections, and API endpoints, just so we can see them all. Cool. And you can also, if you have set owners to these recommendations via the governance capabilities in Defender CSPM, so you can set who should actually be fixing these. You can see show my items only if it's someone that just wants to see what do they need to actually fix. So here you have all of the recommendations that are associated with the APIs that come from Defender for APIs. And some of these recommendations, they're based on either the APIs themselves, API endpoints, and some of the recommendations are based on the Azure API management side of things. Let's go into one of these and to show you an example of one. So this one, API endpoints in Azure API management should be authenticated. So if I go into this one, you can see more information about it. You can see that in this case, it's overdue. There are, and we do have 24 out of 85 API endpoints that have not been authenticated, but that should be authenticated. So if I click on it, we can now see what a recommendation actually looks like here. So in this case, you can see the severity of it. You can see the freshness interval as well. So that means that when authentication has been added into this, when will that update this table? You can see the tactics and techniques. In this case, this is initial access.
Yeah, so you can map it to MITRE essentially.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
So you're able to see like where in the sort of attack path would an attacker use this lack of authentication. Okay. So here underneath now we have the description of this, and in this case it is going over that Azure API management, API endpoints that are within the Azure API management should include authentication for this. And then it provides you with more remediation steps for how to actually set this up. And you can see the policies which are required in order for this recommendation to be remediated. So you need JWTs, client certificates, Microsoft Entra tokens. And underneath you see a list of all of the unhealthy resources. That means these are the API endpoints that don't have authentication that you should set up authentication. You can also see the list of like the API endpoints that do have it. and so on. So yeah, this is very, very useful for a security person to just get the lay of the land. Okay, which are the API endpoints that don't have authentication that we need to authenticate? So this is very helpful for that reason. But there are also other views that you can use to see some of this information. So as well as all of the other recommendations, there are
but
also...
over there, I could also add like like saying that I've understood the problem, but we don't have resources to prioritize this right now. So let's add an exemption for 6 months, and then it will sort of reappear after 6 months.
Yes, you can also create exemptions for these as well. Yeah. And for this, it's up here, so you can create exemptions there. And if there have been exemptions created, you could set the scope for it, the exemption category, if it's mitigated already, or you're waiving the risk, and you can set an expiration date. If that has been created, then afterwards, the API endpoints or whatever the scope was that you set it up for, those resources will appear under not applicable resources. Cool.
But another point there, for example, if you don't have the resources right now to mitigate it, then I don't know if we will touch upon it later, but we have the logic apps for automation. So yeah, and I don't know if you will be talking about this later, but otherwise we can maybe link to the repo where you find some of them.
Yes.
Already.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can trigger your own workflows essentially.
Exactly, and I think that is very useful as well. So just a note there in case people are not familiar with that.
Yes, definitely. We have a link for that. I'll ask maybe Yura if you have a link for that handy, and then we can I suppose show you where to find them, and then how to set up those logic apps and set up a workflow automation whenever like a new resource has come in to this recommendation and several other recommendations as well.
Yeah, we can link it in the description, and then
yeah. Cool. Okay, so this was the view around the recommendations. I also wanted to show you as well the another view that we have. So I've showed you now the unified dashboard, where you can see that overview. You can use the recommendations here to look at it this way. And then we've also got a workbook as well. So workbooks are also under Defender for Cloud Workbooks. We have this workbook underneath here called API Security. And this is a different view into, again, everything that is coming from Defender for APIs. So you can see we've got sort of different, you can select the subscription, the alert severity, if that's of interest. But we've got different kind of tabs for all of this. You can get an overview of what is in your environment at a high level, like, you know, how many alerts are there. You can also see the alert status as well. You can also see the alert status as well. Just make this a little bit smaller so you can actually see these. Cool. So you can see which of these alerts are active and which have been dismissed. You can see these are the medium alerts and so on. You can also see the recommendations, how many there are. So that's the overview. But you can also get an understanding of the coverage of, do you have Defender for APIs enabled in this subscription? In this case, yes. How many API management services are in there? In this case, we have 4. And then you can get more information about these at the API collection level and so on. Okay, posture recommendations as well. Again, you can see the recommendations. You can also see data sensitivity as well. So you can see, you know, are there, you can see all of the credit card number, data sensitivity that has been found, and so on, and the labels. And then last but not least, you can see the threat detections, the alerts that Harris will go into very soon. So that's at a kind of a high level. You can see the workbooks, but there is also another way to get more of an understanding of your APIs and your API environments, and to determine the risk level around your APIs. And this is actually via the Cloud Security Explorer capability that we have. So the Cloud Security Explorer is found there underneath General. What I would say about this is that this is looking at this is providing you with contextual information around the APIs. And the way to enable this in the first place is you do need to have Defender CSPM enabled. So Defender CSPM is another plan that you need to enable, again, from the environment settings, from that same blade that I showed you where Defender for APIs is enabled. You need to enable Defender CSPM there. And if you have that enabled, then you can play around with Cloud Security Explorer, and I'll also show you the attack path as well in a minute. So what can you do here with in Cloud Security Explorer around APIs? So basically, what we've done here is we have brought a lot of the data that we have that's coming into Defender for Cloud, and we have made connections between different aspects of it. We basically, and you can do this for any of the other Defender for API plans that are available here as well: compute, networking, containers, and so on. But you can see APIs is there. So straight up, you can either select all of these and then just see what resources are there. So you can just do that. If we just do a quick search for this, you can find this here, and then you can see some of these resources. Or else, to make it just a little bit more useful, you could do something else. So if we go back into APIs there, so let's say I just want to know about the API endpoints only in this case, and then what more information can I get about these API endpoints? You can see the API endpoints that are exposed to the internet, or what about API endpoints that contain sensitive data? So I'm going to select this one. So straight away, you're able to see API endpoints. They contain sensitive data. And this is like another view that the security person is able to use. So from this, there's 4. So 4 API endpoints contain sensitive data. But what about if we're looking for something more specific? What about API endpoints that contain sensitive data and that have a specific label? So in this case, there's a label called Ninja FTE, and we want to know what are all of the API endpoints that have this sensitivity label. And there's these 2. So in this case, it's very few API endpoints, but you can see how in a bigger organization, there could be so many that it's hard to keep track of them. Even in the unified dashboard, it can be a little bit difficult to kind of go through, API collections, and then which of them have API endpoints that have this. But this is like another view that lets you directly make the query that you're interested in, and then directly see the information. And once you do that, then you're able to see more information here as well about these results, and when it was last scanned, and so on. And if we just click on the actual resource itself, it actually brings you to the resource health, again, the resource health blade that I showed you earlier. And again, it shows you some recommendations that are associated with it, if there's any alerts that are associated with it, and so on. So this is the Cloud Security Explorer is a very powerful way to get contextual information about your API endpoints for whatever it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, and you can actually understand what you're asking for, essentially, because resource graph and KQL and all of those different things. First of all, just getting to the point where you're able to write queries for those things is difficult to begin with, and here you can actually just give to your CISO or whoever that is actually not necessarily all that technical, but can still be able to, well, he knows English, so he's able to search, right?
Exactly. So it's a very kind of easy to use mechanism, and yeah, you don't need to like learn like a difficult query language for it. It's kind of like sort of a drag and drop kind of capability. And as well as this, I showed you like the query builder, but we've also got several templates as well that you can use that are pre-built templates that we have from Microsoft. If you are just interested in just using one of these pre-built ones.
Exactly.
Okay, and then another thing as well is, okay, so say you want more information about which APIs are the riskiest, but you don't really know what you're looking for here. You don't really know like what exactly are the risky APIs, the high priority APIs. We have another thing. So this is the attack path analysis, and the attack path analysis is another capability that comes with Defender CSPM. So you do again need to enable Defender CSPM, and also Defender for APIs if you're interested in seeing attack paths for Defender for APIs. So what attack paths are, at a high level, they give you the possible attack path that an attacker could use to get access to your environment, to get into, to do damage in your environment. So say to get into your sensitive data or something like that. And these haven't been done. We're not showing these, that they're not threat detections, but they are a possible way that an attacker could use to get into your environment, it's actually using the same underlying engine as the Cloud Security Explorer, but these are sort of like the Microsoft created riskiest attack paths that exist, and we have this one, Internet Exposed APIs that are unauthenticated carry sensitive data. So this was actually one that we also saw briefly earlier on as well. And in this case, you can see the attack path basically for how an attacker could actually use to get into your environment. So in this case, there is this API management service called Defender API Demo with this API called Sensitive API. So it contains this API, and this Sensitive API has this API management operation. So that's the API endpoint that is internet exposed, and then this one actually also carries sensitive data. So you can see some general information there. You can see the insights as well that are associated with this, and get more information about how this was discovered and so on. So it's a very powerful view for if you want Microsoft to inform you straight away, this is very, very sensitive. This is something that you should look at to fix without having to go and kind of do your own querying. You can still go and do your own querying with the Cloud Security Explorer. You can use the unified dashboard to see, that all of those APIs that we have that I showed you earlier, you can see that there. But this also gives you a kind of quick, snappy view of what's there, and you can actually see this is critical. That's the level that we in Microsoft have assigned to this, because it's so this is something that's so important, and we know that this exists a lot in a lot of organizations, and they don't know about it. They don't know which internet exposed APIs carry sensitive data and they're unauthenticated. And then next thing you know, without a tool like this, it's very possible for an attacker to actually have a data breach or whatever it is here. So
awesome.
That's
very
pretty
exciting.
much yeah, it's very exciting. Yeah, so that was the main kind of demo that I had for this. Yeah, we'll also paste in the I suppose in the comments as well about the links for how you can set up those logic apps and automations for remediating the recommendations faster. But yeah, if we have a few minutes now, I suppose Harris, do you want to take over?
Yeah, I think Harris, if you could just talk a little bit about how the Purview integration is fitting into all this, because Liana talked a lot about sensitivity labels, and not all of my clients, at least, use Purview. Yeah, I don't know why, but
That's life.
That's just how it is. So yeah, how do we do when people do not have Purview, and how does Purview fit into all this?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So first, I'll start with the case if a customer does have Purview, and just a little bit of background knowledge on Purview itself. Purview is typically used as kind of the governance platform for a lot of our customers. So it's not specific to Defender for Cloud. A lot of customers will use Microsoft Purview for centralized governance across their entire organization. So for making sure they're up to compliance standards across their organization when it comes to sensitive data classification, not just of Defender for Cloud, but also for M365, Office, Word, Excel files. They'll use Purview to define sensitivity labels for all those files as well. And then our goal is, hey, we will honor that same configuration within Defender for Cloud as well. So for customers that are using Microsoft Purview, we will honor any of those custom data sensitivity labels or custom classifications. And there's an easy way to get that set up within Defender for Cloud. But again, there's a lot of customers that aren't using Microsoft Purview yet as well. So what's the experience for them? We do have a default rule set that we will basically fall back on for customers that aren't using Microsoft Purview. So say, for example, you enable Defender for APIs plan, but you don't have Microsoft Purview. We will still classify your APIs against sensitive data. It's just we'll have a default rule set that we'll check against. So, and the rule set's still roughly 120 or so rules that we'll check against. So all those common information types like social security number, passport numbers, highly sensitive information types will still be present, and customers will still get that value even without Purview.
That's
exactly.
Great.
Yeah. So the only thing I'm sort of missing is the customization part when it comes to classification, and if I have some very or more special things there.
Exactly. That is the case, along with sensitivity labels as well. That's something that will only come with Purview.
Awesome.
Cool. Sounds good. And with just a few minutes left here, what I can do is I can also cover some of the security alerts that we have in Defender for APIs here as well. So I'll just share my screen here. Great. So first I'll just navigate here to the security alerts blade within Defender for Cloud. And I do want to mention most of our customers don't really use this blade specifically, like the security alerts within Defender for Cloud. Rather, they'll take these alerts into their own SIEM solution, like Azure Sentinel, for example. So again, Defender for Cloud has this native integration with most SIEM solutions to just take these alerts directly in for their SOC teams to go and investigate and analyze. So in this case, I'm in the security alerts blade. Let's go and add a filter here just to filter by API endpoint related alert. So I'll add this filter here. And here you can see basically a full list of the types of API-related detections that we bring as part of Defender for APIs. So as we mentioned earlier with Defender for APIs, as soon as you enable that plan, we will start actually monitoring all of the API traffic that's coming to that Azure API Management Service. And then we will build basically both machine learning-based detections as well as derive threat intel-based detections for those APIs as well. So let's go ahead and click into one of these alerts just to kind of build more context into what that looks like. So let's say, for example, we have here a suspicious spike in API traffic from a single IP address to an API endpoint. I'll go into the view full details page for this alert here. And in this case, as I mentioned, this is a machine learning based detection. So what that basically entails is we have to first learn the normal behavior for that API endpoint. So in this case, we learned that, hey, for this particular API endpoint, we learned that the average calls from this particular IP address was just 30 calls in this case. So they would make 30 API calls from this IP address to this API endpoint here. And in this particular case, this was raised as an anomalous call and generate a security alert because the observed value of API calls over that short period of time was much higher than what's typically observed for that particular API endpoint. This could be indicative of some sort of data exfiltration attack or maybe brute force attack that's going on. So now the security kind of SOC team has enough information to go and investigate. So we give you the time that this alert happened. We give you more details about the particular IP address that called and other information that can be used for kind of investigation here as well. And one other cool piece that we have here is this is also integrated with Microsoft Purview and that sensitive data classification as well. So you can see, for example, hey, for this particular API endpoint, it's actually exposing all of these sensitive information types and sensitivity labels here as well to help prioritize some of these alerts as well.
Awesome. So for example, I'm just to because one thing I did once when we had a rather simple HR system, like SaaS-based HR system, where I like digging around in just Chrome, F12, and developer mode to see what is happening behind the scenes to, well, look at the API calls and everything. And I noticed that when asking about my or pay, essentially, it just went to an API endpoint saying this and some random numbers. Essentially, it wasn't even a GUID. It was just some numbers to say 7-digit or something. So I did just use my own login and did just try every number to see if I can find someone else's pay or something like that, and that succeeded greatly. So that was not good on the HR system side, but I guess those are the things that you could detect here, right? Because usually you shouldn't see a lot of requests trying to just different values for the same parameter coming from the same IP address or same browser or session or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great scenario that you brought up. I'll actually go into this alert to talk a little bit more about that as well. So the exact case that you just mentioned is actually one of the most common API attacks that really happens. So when Yura was talking earlier about all those API breaches that happened, a lot of times it's something around that same scenario that you just mentioned, where basically it kind of falls under broken object level authorization. And what that basically means is, hey, that API endpoint could have authentication completely configured correctly, but the authorization of that API endpoint was misconfigured, which makes it so an authenticated user can access someone else's data. So it's very similar to the scenario that you just had mentioned there. And this is a very common API related attack that happens. And we do have some detection specifically for that case here. And this is one of them here. So I'll walk into kind of more detail on the specific case that you mentioned and how
the parameter is even EMP ID. So
exactly. Yeah. So for example, in this case, we have parameter enumeration on an API endpoint. And in this case, hey, we have a particular IP address that accesses this API endpoint, for example. And you have an employee ID in this case. So let me go back. Let's go to historical behavior first. So in this case, for example, for this particular IP address, they access this particular API endpoint and they pass in one employee ID value most of the times when they access this API endpoint. But for some reason from this IP address, they're now accessing the same employee ID, but they're in this case, they're calling it 500 times. So instead of only accessing one employee ID number, they're enumerating through the employee ID numbers and accessing 500 different ones. And typically what happens is an attacker will go and see if a particular parameter is exploitable in this case. Like, hey, this employee ID parameter does not have authorization, for example. So they will try one other person's ID, and if it works, they will go and enumerate through every single ID, and that's how you can basically compromise an entire user base. So in this case, what we will do is we will detect, hey, is somebody enumerating through those parameters that aren't typically enumerated through? And in that case, we will generate this as a security alert for your SOC team to go and kind of investigate. But the important part here is this has to be basically like a learned behavior, as it can be typical or behavior for an API endpoint to have a parameter that's supposed to be enumerated through. So the example here is it's important to learn that historical behavior first, that, hey, for this particular API endpoint, we learned that this parameter is only ever accessed once. So that's why this is anomalous. But if this API endpoint was normally accessed many different times, then we would never generate an alert like this. So this is basically to reduce that noise for customers as well.
So this varies from company to company.
That's exactly the case. Yeah, it will vary company to company or within APIs within a company, as well as each API could be representing different business logic for an organization.
So my example was actually a perfect fit here.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess we can use logic
really
apps.
Cool feature.
Yeah, but I guess we can use logic apps then to block Marius when he tries this. Or at least sort of automated.
Yeah, you can set up some automated remediations for a lot of these alerts as well. You can go and trigger a logic app here if you would like to. So say, for example, we saw this activity came from a particular IP address. You could go and block that IP address as well in the future if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that is super cool.
Cool. Sounds good. And yeah, we also have all of these alerts listed in our documentation as well. So what I'll do here is if I just go up to Defender for APIs here. Here's where any customer can go and see all of the different types of alerts that we have available for Defender for APIs here as well. And again, most of them map back to those top OWASP API related risks as well.
Awesome.
This was a really cool feature. So,
Very cool.
so what we still have left is API security testing, but we don't have time for that in this episode. But we'll keep that for another episode, and then that is essentially where you can test your APIs in more of a DevSecOps way with like GitHub Actions and integration there through, is it 42 Crunch? Is that yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, we'll get into that in the episode. So I think we'll call it a day or call it an episode. Thank you.
We have on the brain to learn stuff like this, so we need to make it in 2 episodes, right?
Yes, absolutely. So now I will go and secure all of my unsecure APIs because I have a lot of them. Thank you so much, guys. This was really helpful for me, and I'm sure the viewers will be very pleased with this. Thank you.
It's a great new feature. It's been missing for a long time, so it's nice to see that it's here and it's usable. That's the main thing. It's easy to use, it's easy to set up, and you get great result really quickly.
Awesome.
Thank you for having us. This was really great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Bye.
and Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah. Merry Christmas.
holidays.
Happy holidays.
If you watch this in February, then well, I don't know.
True.
Have a great year.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.